And good afternoon, good morning, or good night, depending on where you are in the time zone. We welcome everyone who's had the opportunity or made the opportunity to take a moment to take a listen to our second episode of the African Conference Call, where we discuss books that we believe are relevant to the experience of the African diaspora. My name is Orlando Taylor. I am the educator, a professor of English. I'm also a poet, a writer, and I'm the CEO of a media company called Kuumba Concepts with a K, WMBA Concepts LLC, which is a media company that is working in all forms of media, including print. I was born in St. Louis, Missouri, and now reside in the Valley of California. My background is I have an undergraduate degree in mathematics, and I have a graduate degree in English and creative writing and film. The purpose of this podcast is to discuss Pan-Africanism and its meaning to the modern time, to allow Africans to control the narrative about ourselves and to educate ourselves about each other so that we are better connected as a people. And my co-host is the lovely, 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 and intelligent Shola. Go ahead, tell them who you are, girl.
Thank you, Orlando. Happy New Year, everybody. So excited about 2025 and what's ahead of us. Yes, my name is Shola Ajayi. I also go by Oluwabusola Ajayi. I'm really excited about being able to record this second episode of our podcast. And it's most especially about what we're going to talk about today. My background is in film. I am a screenwriter and filmmaker. I also work as an educator. I am the founder of You Are for Africa Project Inc., which is basically an organization that sets out to bridge the gaps between people of African descent everywhere. I'm excited about the conversations that we're going to have today and look forward to hopefully having conversations with our audiences, like our listeners. So I think that's it for an intro. Did I cover everying? I guess my background.
Yeah, you
My
got it. You got
background
it.
is
And
Nigerian
please,
American. Yeah.
yeah. And I'm
I was,
African American. So we thought when we created this podcast, having that diversity was important.
Mhm.
Diversity, not only gender but also perspective. Shola goes between the continent and the United States on a regular basis, and I'm based in the United States on
Yeah.
a regular basis. So we thought those things would bring a wonderful I guess,
Perspective. Yeah, different
perspective
perspectives. Yeah.
between us, and we can share. And as we know, there are people who will be listening who come
Mm.
from that same kind of intersectionality of where they exist and how they move about this planet. So our book today is a book that comes from, in all honesty, one of the most influential and greatest writers, I believe, of sci-fi to exist from my personal experience. And I think some other people beginning to understand that view so particularly in modern times. Some of her books have been revisited. And that is the great, honorable Octavia E. Butler.
Mm.
She is she's a renowned African American author who received a MacArthur Genius Grant and a Penn West Lifetime Award for her body of work. She was born in Pasadena, California in 1947, and she was raised by her mother and grandmother. She was the author of several award-winning novels, including The Parable of the Sower, came out in 1993, which was a New York Times Notable Book of the Year, and Parable of Talents came out in 1995, which was winner of the Nebula Award. It's one of the most important awards in sci-fi writing for the best science fiction novel published that year. Five. She was acclaimed for her lean prose, strong protagonists, and social observations in stories that range from the distant past to the far future. Though the MacArthur Grant made it life easier in the later years, she struggled for decades with her dystopian novel exploring themes of Black injustice, global warming, women's rights, and political disparity were, to say the least, not in commercial demand. During these years of obscurity, Butler, always an early riser, woke at 2 a.m. every day to write and then went to work as a telemarketer, potato chip inspector, and dishwasher, among other things.
Mm.
She passed away, unfortunately, in February 24th, 2006. At the time of her death, interest in her books were beginning to rise, and in recent years, sales of books have increased enormously as the issues she addressed in her Afrofuturistic feminist novels and short fiction have only become more relevant. Her work is now taught in over 200 colleges and universities nationwide. The number one New York Times best-selling graphic novel adaptation of her book, Kindred, created by Damian Duffy and John Jennings, received an Eisner Award for Best Adaptation. In media, her novel Dawn is currently being developed for television by Ava DuVernay, Selma and Wrinkle in Time producers. An opera by Toshi Regan, based on Butler's novel Parable of the Sower, was part of the public theater under the Radar Festival, toured worldwide in 2019. Amazon Studios and Juvie Productions, with Viola Davis and Julius Tiney's production company, are developing a drama series from Butler's patterns, beginning with Wild Seed, and the series is being co-written by Nindi Okafor and Monure Akui, who will also direct. So she has had a powerful career. Go ahead, Shola.
Yeah, I was just saying that it's really great to see, and I know we talked about this earlier, but it's really great to see how people are engaging with her content now, all the films that are being made from it and the TV series. But just thinking about how much, when you were talking about how the last few years of her life, she was in obscurity, she was really keeping to herself. And just thinking about how it happens, we hear these stories so much about people not realizing their greatness, in the time that they're alive. You know what I mean? And how hard that is to realize that for her, because I mean, we between the two of us, we've read so many of her books. I mean, she was really brilliant.
I mean, she's the first person when I was lucky enough to get introduced to her in the early 90s. And the first book I read of hers was Kindred. Pardon me. And then I eventually read, after Kendrick, the first book I read after Kendrick was Mind of My Mind, which is part of the Patternist series. And I was just, as a reader and someone who was also wants to be a future writer, I was blown away by the literary quality. I mean, she writes with such depth, with such beautiful wording, and she's able to, and with her writing, she builds out such a visually powerful world that it really made me, encouraged me. At the same time, it convicted me to do better myself as a writer. It also encouraged me, because so much of the sci-fi writing before I was lucky to be introduced to her was all white male. And so it really was a powerful thing for me to find her and the things that she was writing about in such a beautiful way that I had not seen before, because a lot of the writings I had read sci-fi seemed so much stilted, so much more stoic, and the narratives are so almost as uh, sometimes as inhuman as some of the characters are in some of the dystopian sci-fi stories by white men I had. So for me, getting the opportunity to read the depth and the beauty and the prose-like conversations she has in her books was refreshing beyond compare.
Yeah, I mean, I think nicely said, Orlando. I think one of the things that I noticed, especially in this series or the book that we're talking about, is just the way she has been able to write characters without, labeling them with stereotypes. You know what I mean? From a Hollywood perspective, if we're talking about reading a script, this is where they fail. So definitely take a lesson from Octavia and the way that she writes different people, especially if they're not from her community. She writes them in a way that she writes them as if they're human beings, and you still get a sense of who they are and embrace their various ethnicities, races, cultures, outside of this very cookie cutter boxed version of what people believe people in those various communities should be defined as. You know what I mean? And that's what I really loved about this book.
Yeah.
Really
So
loved it.
I enjoyed this book, and I believe that ultimately the reason why we decided to discuss this book is that we believe that some of the ideas and things that she brings out in this book are relevant current times as well as to our future within the diaspora, because the book centers around the it centers around basically, a situation where finally, like many dystopian, the Earth,
Mm-hmm.
humanity has not really solved its issues, and so the book begins basically kind of at the end, and then goes forward back to humanity existence on planet Earth. And so that's one of the things. This series for me personally, the first book called Dawn, and that's what we're talking about. And it's part of a series of 3 books called the Xenogenesis series or saga. And the books are Dawn. Second book is called Adulthood Rites, and the last book is called Imago. And basically, the whole series is looking at as kind of like a Marvel what if. What if we don't solve our problems and an alien species comes in and solves them for us, is how I had it in a sense. And so the book builds out from there in this series. And for me personally, despite a lot of love that is appropriately being given to the pattern in this series, in all actuality, I feel like this particular series is the series, I think, which is a culmination of the pattern series as well as some of the other books that she's written about. Even though they're not direct crossovers, it's clear because in kind of similar to what Anne Rice does, uh, where she has her witches of Mayfair appear in the Interview with the Vampire series briefly because they live down the street from the character Louis. And so then you have this, and so you have a similar intersection happening because in the pattern series, there's a main character called Duro who eventually, I think, is killed in a pattern series. And so you see this crossover between these characters that appear from one book to another. Even though the pattern series is a series, it's not directly like a 1-2 series like Dawn uh, is with the Xenogenesis series. So just kind of want to bring that out that even though there's some direct crossover, these 3 books do fit and are connected to the pattern series as well.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many connections, even like we'll
Mm,
reading Dawn, so many connections
hmm
with all of the stories, that she's written, like there's
Yeah.
so many there in her writing, there's so many patterns, right? But I know that we both discussed different things that we liked about the book. But
Yes.
I think the concern for me is that like, especially we're talking about like we've already destroyed ourselves, you know what I'm saying, in this story that's being
hmm
presented to us. And there's supposed to be this glimmer of hope. And even with like this idea of like this opportunity, I guess some people might say, it was like very hard to ingest like some of the content that was being shared with us and the situations that the characters were dealing
Yeah.
with from moment to moment. It was a lot
She,
to swallow.
she goes deep into some of and what she does, she really addresses some of the things, like the things that we struggle with in this book. I mean, we'll get to those in a moment. Some of the things she addresses, that some of the things that humanity currently struggles with, which is in the past of this book, um, we continue to struggle with in modern times. And it's like she creates solutions to some of these sweeping, quick solutions to these things that we've been struggling with for centuries, almost literally thousands of years as human beings on this planet. And she solves them in a way that is like, oh, really? I see what you did there. And it's
Right.
really amazing that as we get into it. So why don't we just get into it, and so
Mhm.
we can stop kind of tap dancing around it for our listeners. So briefly, one of the things I would say, some of the concepts that we kind of get into, things like, I feel like some of the things that Octavia explores in this first book are, power dynamics,
Mhm.
issues around consent,
Mhm.
violence, issues around transformation, and what does it really mean to have a new beginning? And then I look at Lilith, the character Lilith. She really has it feel like there are multiple ways I think you can see her. Even though she's Nigerian, she chose to give her this name Lilith, which historically from both Christianity and Islam is a name for a woman who, at one point in some stories, she is the other wife of Adam. And she is the one who actually misleads both Adam and Eve into taking the fruit of knowledge. But also, she can be looked at as sometimes as another beginning or an alternate Eve. And I also see the character in the book itself as an alternate Eve, or as our people on the east side of the continent call Dinkinish. The movie that they made, Lucy, talking about the first human, that talks about her DNA and how important that DNA is, and how that DNA goes back, and different stories around who Eve is and versus Dinkinish. I just found that little piece in itself around her name to be a very, very fascinating choice for her to make in the story, because it does feel like at the beginning, as humanity is being brought back alive, awakened, it's like she's being tasked with kind of like restarting humanity.
Right.
And
exactly.
so, go ahead. So, yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, like, because I know we talked about the Eve, the Lucy, the Lilith, you know what I mean? And just thinking about
Mm-hmm.
like these representations, but even to see like with the Lilith definition, like I was looking into it some more, and it was interesting to find out that like the Judaic religions, or the mythologies about Lilith, or
Mm-hmm.
were
Mm-hmm.
considered, because she was considered to be like the first independent woman, it was considered to be a demonic figure. Do you know what I mean? Like, don't you think that
Yes,
that's
yes.
hilarious? Like they saw this like a woman being independent as demonic. And I
But
feel
isn't that
like,
but
oh,
isn't
go
that
ahead, go
today
ahead.
draw but isn't that today to draw the comparisons in many societies, including the United States and several Eastern societies, that women in
Exactly.
leadership, I mean, and there's conversations being had now that unfortunately there are many who did not vote for Kamala Harris because she was a woman,
Mm,
and because
yeah.
they do not believe in women
Women
in leadership
leading.
from a
Mhm.
religious perspective. And it's just not Islam. So, we're not trying to say that one religion is worse than the other, but all of them have shown a great deal of, in my opinion, a great deal of disrespect towards women and their ability to lead, their ability to think, and their ability to be individuals who are of value to humanity. And that's
Exactly.
clear. And I felt like that's clear. That's clearly something I feel that Octavia, in a very layered way, is trying to look at and address and understand, why is that still in this modern era? We still have issues with women in leadership.
And that's the thing, like even just the brief descriptions that we've just had now, like just talking about how women in leadership are painted as evil. You know what I mean? And even
Mm-hmm.
thinking about
Mm-hmm.
how we see elements of that in the story as well. You know what I mean? And it's like it shows the foresight of where Octavia's thinking is as well. Like she knows societies. And that's the thing that we keep seeing as we go through the book, is that it's very clear to her how human beings, in various societies behave. And I
Mm-hmm.
thought that was really, really to find out about the Lilith representation in different religions and how it all kind of ties
Exactly.
together as well.
And see
There's
how
so many connections.
and it's almost as if she occupies multiple facets of each idea of living in the past. You
Exactly.
know what I'm saying? So that was one that
Absolutely.
was really interesting. But for those who haven't read the book, getting into the story of the book. So the premise of the book is again, she builds the story. She starts off at the beginning of course, spoiler alerts. So she starts at the beginning of this story, and humanity has already had its World War III, and we're coming into it as readers at a point where the race that has, or the people, or the beings that call themselves, if we're pronouncing it correctly, the Oankali. It's spelled O-A-N as in Nancy, K-A-L-I, Oankali, or
Mhm.
Oankali, whichever you pronounce it. But anyway, those individuals have taken over the planet because we have destroyed ourselves. We've had a World War III. And these individuals who are the Oankali, they tell us later early on in the book, they are a species of intelligent beings who have been around as far as they know for more than 2 million years. And this process of them taking on, and one of the things that doesn't make clear, which kind of speaks to the nature of the Oankali, they never make it clear that how they get other species to meld with. So the
Mm.
issue, so the issue is in the book, for those who have not read, is that the Oran Khalid came to this planet, and it is believed that they have been watching this planet for some time. Because if you look at the pattern of the series, you see that there are other alien species that will come to the planet at the same time. And I do believe that this is that the pattern of the series and uh, these books, the Xenogenesis series do go together. Whereas I think that the Xenogenesis is the end of the pattern series, basically what happened at the end of those series, and it melds into that. So the Oran Kali shows up, they take all humanity as they tell us that's left, because they are a species that is incapable of their diversity of DNA. So over the last 2 million years, they've been capturing other species or working with other species and trading with other species with respect to DNA and knowledge, so that they as a species can stay alive, because over time their diversity has in their DNA has been corrupted. And so that's why they are even interested in the humanity. And one of the reasons they, instead of just simply taking the DNA and run, one of the individuals in the Oran Kali, I believe you pronounce it, Jediah, when he wakes up Lilith, he's explaining to them that we needed to wake up humanity. Even though we understand DNA, we need to understand how that DNA operates. In other words, how humanity operates amongst itself, so they can understand how, as we bring this DNA into our DNA gene pool, we need to understand how it's going to show up in the new species that comes out of this thing. And so basically, on a high level note, when I was reading all that, felt like the Oran Kali is basically telling humanity, you couldn't take care of yourself. You almost destroyed yourself. So we stepped in and did what you couldn't do.
Right, exactly. So basically, they're supposed to be these almost like these guardians or parents, right?
Yes.
Like to a certain extent, like, oh, you made this big mistake, so we're here to fix your mess, and you're going to have to run things the way we say you run it, until we feel like you are worthy enough, I guess, to be in charge of it again.
Exactly.
But I think also, like, they do a really good job. The Owen colleague do a really good job of leaving stuff out. You know what I mean? Like,
A lot.
like little by little, there are more clues given as to like what this relationship is between us. At first it seems like, oh, we've saved you, you're alive. You know what I'm saying? And then you slowly start to hear like what this relationship really is. And I think, this is where those parallels are when we start to see this idea of power, and I know we haven't gotten there yet, but just looking at this idea of power and oppression and what that really looks like and what that can be.
But that comes up very early, doesn't it? And what we need to do and how we need to address that, because the first thing I thought about, and it honestly didn't take me long to get there in this relationship structure that they had, it immediately reminded me of the relationship between Africans and white colonial settlers, because white men years ago said that they had to live by this manifest destiny idea. And that's exactly what the Oran Kali sound like. That they said that they had to go around and, help these other species who were destroying themselves. No, you weren't really helping these people destroying you, or helping yourself to other species' DNA, because you're corrupt. And so when I looked, I said, this relationship looks very much like, because in Manifest Destiny says that we're going to bring civilization, we're going to bring whiteness, we're going to bring, true civility to this planet everywhere we go, because nobody has. And that's that arrogance of it, that you couldn't see these other people. Speaking of humanity, white folks, type of white people could not, and white ideology that comes out of white supremacy and colonial settlerism says that you are incapable of leadership and you're incapable of really dealing with your own resources. So we, as the white race, particularly white men, we're going to help you out, whether you want it or not.
Yeah.
And that leads, and that led into ultimately led into the conference. What is it? Is it the Warren Conference or the Berlin Conference, where they got together divided up all non-white regions of the planet for them to go in and take control. And I looked, I said, oh my God, she's doing a comparison of, I feel like she's doing a comparison of white people who did that to Africans. And now she's making, okay, what happens if you have non-humans doing it to all of humanity? How does that look?
Exactly. And I think that is the kind of the most beautiful thing about this, right? Because I know that we're looking at oppression, right, from the perspective of like what white supremacy has done to basically the world, But
Yes.
even just
Mhm,
thinking
mhm.
about like oppression, because you and I, I'm sure like we've had tons of conversation, not just about race, but like even the oppression that happens like in a place like Nigeria, you know what I mean? Because it's everywhere, you know.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
thinking about how even within these communities or tribes or whatever, there are these levels of oppression that follow this same model, right? And I think
Mhm.
that was what is another aspect to look at, could kind of open up our mind about oppression and power structures, you know, so that we can learn from it and shift it, you know, that the power structures can be set up in a way that benefits all people, you know what I mean, and not just one group or one set of people, you know. And I think that that's the thing that was really, really interesting, is just seeing like how I felt, understanding that everyone was being oppressed and what the power structure of that looked like with this group, with the Onali, but also looking at the power structures or power dynamics or levels of oppression, you know, within with small groups, not just like from the Western perspective with white people, but whites towards Africans, but also looking at it from the perspective of Africans and Africans against Africans, you know. And I
Oh,
thought
definitely.
really, really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, because she lays it. I'm like, wow. So she's like, okay, since you couldn't solve that problem with yourself, guess what? These people solved it. So everybody is now chattel slave or indigenous, or however you want to look at it. And guess what? We need your DNA. And we're going to take your DNA, whether you like it. And actually, they took DNA from people. The only reason they woke them up, remember, in the book, is because they need to understand human behavior, and to the point where it felt like in the book they were trying to weed out certain parts of human behavior, either through genetics or either through trying to control them in certain ways. And that's very much how white supremacy works and how colonial settling has operated around the world. It
Mm.
basically it's gone to all these other places. It's told your culture is not relevant. It's told your music is not relevant. That's why we know differently. And you're told that your language is not relevant. You need to get on. You need to get on board with your white folks and what we're doing, and you will truly have humanity. You will truly have knowledge. Truly be where you know. And that's, to me, I felt like the same spiel, so to
Mhm.
speak, that the Oran Khalid has for all humanity. And
Yeah.
it's to the point where they don't give a care, just like I don't give a care what you think. They're gonna do what they want
Yes.
to do. They don't do what they
Yes,
want to do.
exactly.
And the half truths they tell all throughout the book, you can clearly see that the Oran Khalif are not being 100% honest
Percent.
when they
Exactly.
talk. And
Absolutely.
doesn't that sound like some of the relationships that
Mhm.
Africans have had with, whether it's African countries or black or individual groups of black Africans in other
Mhm.
places have had, dealing with predominantly white government? They never seem to be telling you the full truth. Just tell me the truth. You don't want us here, or whatever it is, or you don't, or you want whatever it is. Tell
Yeah,
me the truth up front. And that's an
they
African thing.
can't.
Africans do believe, or by and large, believe in truth and honesty amongst each other. Because I understand that's the only way it's going to work.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that yeah, exactly. Like I think with the story that we're kind of reviewing here now, that we see examples of this all the time. Like, but at the end of the day, we also know that the Oankali, like, either, like you're gonna do it or not do it. You know what I mean? Like, we'll just, if you
Exactly. And
decide
that's
not to, we're gonna put you asleep. We'll wake you up in 200 years, and you're gonna be like, all right, I don't want to sleep anymore. You know what I'm saying? So,
right.
I think that's the thing, is that like at the end of the day, like we realize that no matter what, there's no choice. And that's the part that's so scary. And that's what was so disturbing about the story, especially as we reach the end, is that like there's no choice. Like there's no choices here. There's an illusion of a choice, you know what I mean? But they've already set out the plan, you know, and it's just really interesting that they like to play with the idea like, oh, you said yes, so that means that you're really in for it. Like you're really into this, you're really agreeing to this. But like at the end of the day, you realize that there's no choice. And that's yeah, she just did such an amazing job, like presenting that, you know what I mean? And
Exactly.
letting the reader know that this is a situation for so many people in our world today. You know what I mean?
And then, like you were talking about how when you're reading it, and it really, this is it's a situation that is very uncomfortable as you read it, because when you make that connection to, oh, I see what she's doing. She's making this kind of allegorical comparison, basically putting the Oran Khalid as the new white people, and everybody else is basically people of color, all the black folks on the planet Earth. And see how, and, and so see how this feels, see how this looks. But also, one of the things that brought to mind in the way that Oran Khalid operate without permission, and as we go into some of the more topics about identity, they operate without permission. And what I mean by that, without permission, is that I saw, or what I felt when how when they cure diseases, or they kept, and not only they cure disease, but remember, they're keeping their DNA. And they have a way, the way Jediah explained it, they have a way of basically an organic archive of all DNA of species they've been in contact. That is a part, and being able to access it is a part of all of their ability. They access DNA from whatever species as needed for the needs of the future of this Oankali species, which is now we talk about multi-race, we talk about a multi-species now. See what I'm saying? How she's getting at this in a very, she's backing into it in a way. So if you are a species now, who over the last 2 million years has incorporated, or at least a million years incorporated other species because your DNA is corrupt and you can't replicate differentiality in order to keep the species going. That sounds very much like a situation with Henrietta Lacks, who was the American Black female who DNA was taken by the medical industry. Yeah. And they were able to develop, remember, they were able to develop all kinds of
cures, right? Or vaccines.
Cures. Yeah. Vaccines using our sister Henrietta Lacks's DNA without her permission. They made billions of dollars. And only in the last few years have they been forced to pay Henrietta Lacks's family a portion and keep that going, because you took DNA in order to create cures, all kinds of things, and you didn't ask, and nor did you bother to offer those cures to Black people directly. And I said, wow. And I was like, wow. All of humanity is Henrietta Lacks. All of humanity. Henrietta Lacks. You had your DNA taken from
you know what I mean? We owe a lot to her.
You see?
And
humanity owns a lot to her. Exactly. That her DNA had these wonderful properties in it they don't fully understand. Because if I remember correctly, she also is connected to the most ancient DNA, and that's the haplogene, HAPLO, which dates back, to Dinkins. The haplogene dates back to the oldest female ever found.
Crazy.
It's crazy how she really kind of embedded that
all together.
And had it all together. And whether we're making these inferences or not, it's there. Whether we're making an inference or she meant it, it's there.
It's there. It's there. Like so clearly there. Like all you can, as you're reading it, all you can do is make the comparisons. You know what I mean? Like all you can do is make the comparisons. And just to hear like, you know, reading other information about her and like listening to other interviews about like why she wrote this story and what was happening during the time. Like she was responding to like the news and what was happening in the world because it was the late 1980s, right? You know, Reagan's in power. He's ready to start doing nuclear wars. You know what I mean? So you can tell like this story is on her heart. You know what I'm saying?
Yes. And this is one of the later stories she wrote. And I do believe, because we talked about one, unfortunately, there are no interviews that I could find where she discusses this series.
Right.
And that was the saddest thing for me, because I really would have loved to hear some of her thoughts on what she wrote and why she wrote it. But also, she just was she died. Many of the people around her said she died with a great deal of sadness because they felt that a lot of the things she was writing about, humanity was still struggling with, and she was pretty much a recluse by the time she passed away, unfortunately. And I do believe that she was wrestling with these things she had written about, and she was unhappy that humanity, not only her, but other sci-fi writers or dystopian writers trying to prophesy and based on what we understand in their creative side, telling we need to make some changes in how we operate and move about in this planet. And we have not seen the level. We haven't seen the level of effort to make the changes for the positive as we've seen for people to do even worse.
Exactly. I mean, I would love, it would be so great to have a conversation with her now and to see what everything's happening. You know what I mean? I just wonder how much her heart would break more. You know what I'm saying? And like, even thinking about her other series, like just trying to like imagine what she would have written if she did get to witness some of those changes. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
like how she would have felt, so that part obviously makes me sad for her, you know what I mean? But I'm so grateful for being able to tell stories where people that we never would have seen in these situations in most instances, you know what I mean? Because of their race, because of their gender, like are the leaders of her stories. You know, they're at the forefront of her stories. And I'm so grateful to her for doing that.
Okay, so I'd like to go ahead, if you don't have anything else to say on that, to move into her discussions around identity. And one of the ones I wanted to deal with first is the issue of how she deals with one of the particular genders that at her time, where the issue was not as prevalent as it is now. And that is the issue of transgender.
True. Yeah.
She deals in this book, she brilliantly deals with transgender issues in a very sweeping and like almost dismissive manner.
Right.
And what I say by that, for those who have not read the book, or those who have and may not didn't see it the way I see it, what I mean by that is this. On this planet, of course, man, we have this big issue in the last 10 years about understanding and dealing with so-called transgender people, people who have a biological dysplasia around their gender. Whether you believe it or not, it's not an issue. It is a thing. I'm not getting into the conversation about what it is, whether it is or isn't. It's obvious it is, because people are going through this. So that's a real thing. However, what kills me is the amount of time and effort we put into it when the numbers of people who actually are transgender are less than 1% of the world population. Okay. So most of the places where you live, there probably are very few, if any, transgender people in anywhere. And so we spend an inordinate amount of time, in my opinion, on that issue. And what she does in this book, for those, again, who haven't read or really kind of set with the content of the book, what she does immediately is we learn that as a species over time, the WWIII, they have what you basically, when they go through puberty, and this is what she did in order to address that, I feel, she turned everybody basically into transgender individuals. And some people might be, oh my God, what do you mean? We all transgender. How she did it was brilliant. What happens with the WWIII species and those species who incorporate into them going forward is that even though you are born a specific gender, and with them, their genders are male, female, and non-binary, and it's the way it has been with them for millions of years now, they don't have a problem. And what happens is that originally that species, as you go through your puberty, you go into a molten state, and your body is going through what we call the changes that you go through in puberty. But you go through it differently with the WWIII. Your body has like a period of days or weeks where it is changing. And at the end of that pubescent period, or that pubescent change, should I say, you might be the same gender, you might not. But the vast majority or the WWIII, they change gender.
Yeah.
When they go through that molten state. So you might have been born male, but you might end up being non-binary. You might have been born female, but when you go through your puberty change, you might end up being male. So she dealt with that in a sweeping manner, and it just went on, because this is just the way it is. And there was no discussion even amongst humans about the WWIII. There was none. There was no pushback or none of that kind of thing. And it was just interesting because they recognized immediately, she just trying to, this is how this species is. And guess what? Now you're the same.
I think she did a really good job of addressing it in different ways, because people would ask like, oh, this Owen Kali feels male. You know what I'm saying? Like that was something that was the consistent thing that some of the characters would say. I think it's a little bit more complicated here, but I think it, in the world that we're living in, unfortunately, we have so many factors that make people afraid of this transgender situation, this topic. And a lot of the factors deal with religion. You know what I mean? Like at the end of the day, religion like is at the helm of like why people have so many issues with this transgender conversation. But it's true. Like in the book, she does this is how it is, like outlines it. This is how it is. This is how we are. This is what it is. And then that's it. You know what I mean? And I feel like if people were willing to have conversations to make it so that transgender people can have the rights that they obviously need, right? Because they're still human beings, right? And that people that maybe don't understand the transgender topic or issue would come to a place of understanding, right? So it's not an issue. Do you get what I mean?
Yeah, this would be a great book for you to read.
It still follows all the similar things, it still follows all the similar things that we're dealing with, like women being in power, Black and white white people being in the same environments. It's still all of this, you know what I'm saying? And it all goes back to the fact that people are conditioned to believe that these things are not supposed to be the way it's supposed to be. And the question that the book is asking is, why not? You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Like,
You got it.
and
Exactly. It's like, why can't we get along on this issue?
exactly.
Why is this such a powerful issue for us in the 21st century?
Exactly.
And then to segue over to looking at the Uloi, for those of you who not read the book, are the non-binary people in society. And they are prevalent. And one of the things she did, I felt, is that she elevated person being non-binary to be just as important as someone with a specific gender, because because the Uloi are responsible for healing, and they are responsible for archiving of genetic data so that they can access it and when needed. And so in that, she brilliantly says, yeah, you might have an issue with somebody who's non-binary, but she elevated them that in this society, amongst this species, there's no de-elevation of any gender. Every gender has a important space and place in our society. And I was like, see?
I mean, and that's the thing, like, this is like an example of why people should read, you know what I mean? Because these are the kinds of things that expand people's minds, right? And thinking.
See, now you're gonna get email people, you're gonna get email from people saying that you think they dumb.
Well, no, I mean, I think like sometimes our issue is that a lot of people are reading the same stuff. You know what I mean? Like maybe a romance novel, maybe like exploring some of these topics, it can open up our minds to like some of the issues that we face in the world today, 'cause, I mean, but I'm not gonna tell the audience that, our listeners, that it was a comfortable read, you know what I mean? Because there's a lot of uncomfortable things happening,
Yes. And I think they're just to piggyback what you're saying, things you have to see, but I think they are things, they're difficult things, and you must sit with.
Yeah,
we're at a point where this is very similarly happening to us. And I say that because during the previous presidency of Donald Trump, they've had the American government and other governments had to finally admit. Why? Because they've all been creating space military units. And the United States is one of those who now has a space military unit. And they at one point were actually recruited. So they believe and understand that there are other species of intelligent life out there. But one of the things when I talk to people about this book, as I call myself as as an exhorter for this book to get you to read it, is that the similarities between what's happening in this book are so close to what's happening right now. It's ridiculous. Because again, like I said, they admitted that there's aliens watching them. These aliens operate in such a manner that you can look at it and perceive it as arrogant, because they have been running through your airspace on your planet, and some believe have actually landed and been on this planet for a while from time to time with no regard for who you are as humanity. They haven't even contacted you, as far as we know. You have no idea what their ideas are. Their level of intelligence is clearly above ours, because they understand the science of space travel and physics, that they're actually able to do it and build flying machines that operate completely above and beyond we have currently. So from my perspective, it's almost as if to me, I look at the book from my own personal perspective, like, we have better figure all these differences out before we become like humanity is. Literally, you're now, instead of being multiracial, you're multi-species. And you have no control at this point. You have no control. How can you have control of people who can communicate telepathically with one another, who can touch one another and heal them, and who can bring DNA, who literally, because remember, they altered Lily. They made her taller and they made her strong, because they knew what she's going to have to deal with human men who have a problem with her being the leader of humanity. She's the leader. So she's technically the leader of humanity, the president of all humans, because they're using her as one. Those who don't, Lilith's role in the book is basically to get everybody on board to what the Oankali are doing. And so in many cases, she's dropped all three books. I've read all three of them. So in many cases throughout the book, certain humans look at her as a traitor or collaborator with the alien species. So on top of being this living character of respawning and reorganizing humanity for a new future, literally heaven on earth, in a sense, because Oankali we destroyed the earth, and then Oan Kali reinvived it. So now you have heaven on earth. That's a little religious, a little
yeah, a little bit.
parallel, a little bit.
Not
That's what she
Orlando.
did. So right, exactly. I know it's hard for some folks out there, but this book is deep and it's very layered.
It's very deep.
So she deals with that. So if you're not, ultimately, I feel like this book is saying that if you can't get your ish together out here, somebody will do it.
Yeah.
Somebody would do it.
We'll get somebody to do it, right? And I
Right.
think that's the big thing that Lilith has to grapple with too, is that like she is not happy about the situation. She makes it very clear throughout the entire book. You know what I mean? But in her mind,
her
she's looking at the bigger picture, right? And I think like even in this situation now that we're all in, like, and I don't know where the listeners lean, you know, politically, but even in this situations, we have people, you know, kind of hopefully saying that they're seeing the bigger picture, you know. And that's one of the things that's so funny about this book, because there's so many parallels, so many that you can see in our world today, you know. But yeah, she's very unhappy about the situation. She spends a good majority of it fighting with Owen Kali, and then eventually just has to give in, you know. And she believes for what is for the greater good of everybody, you know what I mean? At least the human race.
Exactly. Because they this undertone, one of the undertones on top of what you're talking about that I recognize sometimes as you read the book is this undertone to me of basically recognizing and understanding exactly where you are now. And they have a great deal of resentment for her, ultimately because I feel like you didn't do what you were supposed to do, and you recognize as humans, we didn't do what we were supposed to do. We didn't learn how to get along. We didn't. We failed. And that's what ultimately the Owen Kali, that's one of the things that's hard about reading this book, because this is also a letter to all of humanity. That if you keep going in this direction, you are a failure. You failed. And the Owen Kali all but say that to him, basically intimating like, well, if it hadn't been for us saving you in your little ghetto planet, you wouldn't exist at all anymore. Right. On your ghetto planet. All the wars you have, all the poverty you have, all the hate you have, all the discrimination you have a ghetto planet.
All of it, yeah.
And we've been around for 2 million years. And so we're going to bring you up. And we've been watching you for quite some time. You don't know what you're doing.
Exactly.
Not that bright. You keep on destroying. So we waited until you destroyed yourself, and what was left, we collect. Good day. Say thank you.
You've had your chance.
Thank you.
So now it's our turn. Yeah.
So thank you that a more superior, get me now, a superior being has saved you. Just say thank you. He brought you all this wonderful modernization, all this wonderful power and healing, just like we brought, like white people in colonialism brought all of the industrialization and modernization. We brought you all of that, humans. You're now better. You're now healed. You don't have all those diseases. Yes, you don't have the freedom you used to have, and no, you're not humans anymore. You're human Oran Kali hybrids, whatever else we got in IDI. That's what you are now.
Yep.
Say thank you because you still exist. And guess what? This is what you want, because you all wanted to come into space and you all wanted to have some wonderful abilities.
Yeah. I mean, if we really want to look at this as like a warning, you know, I mean, if you don't,
it is.
I mean, the description of the Owen Kali, like, I don't know if you Googled like what people imagine they look like. They
couldn't match it.
You know what I mean?
They couldn't match it. Some of the pictures that I saw people trying, of the pictures trying to drum, and I'm like, they're getting close to it. But I said, yeah, it kind of looks like. But I said, it's clear that the Owen Kali are not a cute people.
Right, and they make it very, very.
And so now,
you know,
go ahead.
Yeah, I was just saying that it's very apparent in the way that they're described, and there's not a lot of descriptions, but the way that people react to them, the fact that they have to like alter the emotions of people so that they don't run and flee, you know. And I kept thinking, like, it sounds like, I don't know if you ever saw the Arrival movie with Amy Adams. But, you know, that's, you know, how they describe the aliens are very mysterious in that movie, right? But we do see elements of them. We see elements of them in that film. And that's what I kept thinking of. And I was just like, imagine. I was like, oh no, this is like a warning. Do you guys want to find yourself in this situation with this whole story? You know what I mean? Because like, we can stop it. You know, it doesn't have to be this way, you know? And I thought that was really interesting.
And I love it because they were forced to the relationships a little bit. They were forced to deal with a woman in a way they never had to before.
Yeah.
Because
this is your overseer, and we made this choice, and there's nothing you're going to do about the choice we made for you.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's part of what I think with Lilith's character, Iako, that she, like you said earlier, she understands the situation, and she's like, what are you going to do to fight against it? You don't have the power or the ability. So one thing you might want to do, as she intimates later in the book, I think what she's saying, it felt like she was like, let's go along to get along until we know something more.
Until we can do, yeah, exactly. Till we can come
and
up
that's why I feel like she does.
So that we can win. You know what I mean?
Because they are helping us. They're altering our bodies. They're making us stronger. They're making some of us taller and more, helping us being able to fully access our intellectual potential.
Right.
So let's go along with it and see what happens. But you have a lot of people, because they can't deal with all of these otherisms that humanity didn't address before that happened.
Always
now it's a real struggle.
Always an
And
issue.
so I want to
Unity.
And if I can,
let's all get on the same page.
Exactly.
Always.
And so that to me is a segue into talking about family structure. Unless there's something more you want to talk about from the previous discussion.
No. I mean, I feel like we could talk about each section so much, you know what I mean? But for the sake of time,
I agree.
For the sake of time, yeah, let's move on to the family structure. I think that would be a good segue.
Okay, so family structure. So those who know, so in family structure, we have our mom, dad, kids, all that kind of stuff. Well, one of the things I feel like, two things, but she truly believes, and these characters truly have a village feel because they're all connected.
Mm-hmm. They're
literally all connected through their DNA, and they can connect through each other and have conversations. So in this book, the Oankali can communicate on a group level, as well as they can communicate between ships by touching the ship and the communication, their thoughts communicating through the techno-organic material of their ships and of one another to communicate themes and warnings and all those kinds of things. So if you can imagine a situation, you living in, say, for instance, one of our listeners is living, say, for instance, in New York. Once he touched a ship that is that a person, one of the ships, they can communicate from that ship to another ship through touching that ship to somebody, say, for instance, all the way down in Botswana, or all the way over in Brazil, or all the way over in California from New York, and communicate, as well as they can kind of like see their own DNA. So they can see the good and the bad in their DNA and make choices. So in their family structure, you have male, female, and Uloi. And the Uloi, as we talked about before, is non-binary. That makes up the family. Now that humans are involved, most families are basically 5 structure. In other words, you have male, female humans, or at least 2 humans who are in a relationship together, because they can recognize that those humans might be 2 humans who are hetero or 2 humans who are not hetero. And so now you add 2 humans who are hetero with 3 Oankali, 1 male, 1 female, and 1 non-binary. Yeah. So so all these issues we've had around formation of family, what family looks like, now you're being told this is your family. You have no choice. The only choice you have is a little bit of who's going to actually be involved in this collective of 5 beings who are making children, but you do not have a choice in whether or not you're not going to participate.
Right.
And then those who didn't participate, just a spoiler alert for the second book, those who didn't participate with the Uloi were sterilized. They cannot have children.
At all.
At all. Damn. So if you're either in with it,
you're in or out. You're out.
You're in or out.
Oh my God.
And that's what I found very interesting, because we have made such a big deal over gender and sexual orientation, as well as the different forms of marriage, because we act like this pseudo Judeo-Christian idea about a marriage between one man and one woman is what it has always been. And we lie to ourselves that some God has said this is the way it is, despite the fact we can look in all types of Judeo-Christian texts.
And other religions around the world.
And you clearly see that polygamy was the form of marriage. That polygamy was one of the biggest forms of marriage at that time, as well as many societies made room for people who don't want to get married. They have children, and there was no hate. There was not all this hate you have toward a person who has children and they're not married. But are they taking care of those children, and are those children positively intersecting with their community? That's what has always mattered, not the other stuff. And so it's interesting how in this book, how they deal immediately, again, family structure is what it is.
You don't have a again, you don't have a choice in it. This is how we get down. And this is how you get down, because now you are us, and us is you.
Mm-hmm. Whether you like it or not. And that's the thing
Whether
too,
you
is
like
that
a
like
lot.
talking about the family structure and just the aspirations of Octavia Butler as well, because she was a single woman, there's not a lot of information out there about whether she was in a relationship or anything. So for her to model this kind of family structure in the book, you know what I mean? In Dawn, and just seeing how versatile the family structure is, right? Like we never see any of the characters. We don't see any single characters, you know what I mean? Like even Lilith, is put into a partnership. You know what I mean? They are constantly looking for somebody for her, and it's very telling for Octavia to like make that a huge portion of the book. You know what I mean? To be how important it is to be in relationship with someone else, and then also the family structure becomes very versatile, even with this group, the Owanali and stuff like that.
But very strong too. And the family, what's also very powerful in the book, despite how you might feel about the deception, for me personally, about the Owen Khalid and some of the things they do, they firmly believe in family. They have a very strong understanding. They have a very positive and strong understanding of what family bonds mean, what they are. They literally keep DNA from elders who passed away so that they can bring what was good about them back into the community. And I thought to myself, how West African that sounds.
That feels, yeah, absolutely. Like
how West Africa, and how they understood, it felt like they understood the village, these alien people understood the concept of a village more than we do. Because even though, like, say, for instance, like when she became part of a unit with Jediah and
Joseph, right?
And Joseph and what was the other character? Nakans, Nakan. When she becomes in a relationship with all of, the bonds between them were very serious. There's no concept of violence between them, particularly in their relationship. That's one of the things also. They don't believe in violence between them. Violence between them is truly an albatross in the society. Violence against one another. They do not believe in it. And it is something that they have worked to beat out in their species. Violence for the sake of violence because you don't get along with each other. I was like, and like I said, how they understand the village, like, even though Nakans and Daya and all those people, they might be in one place, they would never not think about the extension of their family that actually traveling through space. They communicate with by touching the planet, by touching one of the other ships or something like that. And these individuals were part of their family, were on other ships and other parts, and they were deeply connected to them and deeply dependent on them. Like when they had children, and this is when they were making decisions on what DNA should we include, because they were still trying to understand human DNA and trying to make sure that the new being that showed up, this merger between humanity and Oran Khalid, was not a failure. And that, to me, that felt so much like the village. All the people participating and understanding and making sure people got fed, physically make people got knowledge, physically people understood what their roles were in that society, in that group. And also, what I also found is that because everybody had the potential to transgender, there was no role. Everybody does every role. Is capable of doing any role and the responsibilities of any role. And again, that's how it used to be. Growing up in a single parent home, and I know people might poo-poo on it and all that kind of stuff, that's fine. Do whatever you're going to do. I grew up in a beautiful single parent home with my mom, who taught us a lot, who taught us about being Black, who taught me that even if, when I came out to her and she asked me, she told me point blank, she said, if I hadn't been positive towards you, what would you have done? She said, and I told her, this would have been the last conversation. She said, I told her, this would have been our last conversation if you had been toxic towards me. And I came out to you. And she said, beautiful. She said, because that's how I taught you. You don't go around people begging them. She said, begging them for your love, and they treating you like nothing. She said, you did exactly what she did. If that had been the case, you would have been doing exactly what you're supposed to do, because that's what I taught you. You don't show up in nobody's face who don't like you and don't love you. And so I knew at that point, okay, I knew who my mother was for sure at that. And so I'm good with growing up in a single parent home that I grew up and learning how to do all kinds of things outside of road. And it's the very reason why people tell me to this day, say, shoot, you cook better than any woman I ever met. And you can sew? How you learn to sew your pants up? Because my mama taught me.
Taught you, exactly.
So, my mama purposely taught me how to sew a hem in your pants, make a cuff in your pants, sew a rip in the tear in your pants or shirt or whatever. That's what you're supposed to learn how to do. That's not just for some, what am I not going to do it now? I got to wait for a woman to do it? That doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, but I mean, even Orlando, like what you're saying about these various roles in the family structure, I think one of the big takeaways too is the level of communication, right? Like it just shows us like that, that the Oankali, like they're known as a peaceful people. They don't believe in violence, but their level of communication is so high. You know what I'm saying? And it's just
Extremely
really
high.
interesting to see when the violence does occur, that it's from people that don't know how to express like how they're feeling, what they,
It's
what I
from the
mean? Like they
humans.
literally
It's
can't
from the
express
humans.
themselves
Go ahead
and
and
they
say it.
lean
Go
into
ahead and say it.
violence for it. Yeah, exactly,
Right.
to get their point
The
across.
violence that occurs
It
in the
says a
book
lot.
after they're captured, the violence that occurs in the book, for those who haven't read it, is humanity's violence towards each other.
Exactly.
Because in the book, unfortunately, there are incidents where we see that the humanity is still not learning. Not only in this book, but in the second book as well.
Yeah.
You'll see that despite what Oran Kali has to offer is showing them, and yes, we talk about the lies that they told and the obfuscation, all of that. However, despite all of that, Duan Kali has shown up in ways that are more powerful than any humanity could show up for themselves. Yeah. And like you said, one of the reasons why they're also powerful is because they communicate at an extreme level, historically, extremely.
Yeah, and we see it.
And so,
we experience it while reading the story. You know what I mean? Like even the way they communicate with Lilith, like really working out like what some of her issues might be. Why do you feel this way? How can we make you feel different? You know what I mean? Like there's always this question. They give her space to answer. You know what I mean? Before they before they lay down the law, like this is it. This is the way. But there's always the space to communicate about it, to talk about it, to kind of work it out. You know what I mean? For the final.
What do you think then with all of that? Because like you said, we could talk for quite a long time on this book and the series as a whole. What do you feel are the book's themes meaning, or what do you think the themes of the books mean for the future of Africa and the diaspora?
Yes.
What is that? What came out? What was some of the takeaways that came for you? Things that Africans need to take from this book?
I mean, I think, we've talked about this a lot, but just even the idea of seeing ourselves in the future was very important to me. You know what I mean? And I wish that there were more Africans that were described in this story. You know what I'm saying? Because I think, we as Africans, and people might say I'm wrong, but I don't think that we place ourselves in a futuristic space enough. You know what I mean? So my thing is that like, I really wanted to talk more about like, how do we encourage people to put us in those spaces, writers, artists, you know what I'm saying? So that we can start to really imagine it. But I think one of the big things too is kind of around this idea around power, you know what I mean? Like, especially because in Nigeria specifically, I can't speak for the other African countries, but I feel like we give up our power a lot because of money, you know what I mean? Because we know that the West will pay whatever, and that leads us down this path of like not being able to create space where we have control over our own destinies in Nigeria. People might not agree. People might not agree at all, but I feel like the same people have access to the money and power in Nigeria when that access should be available to everybody. And, I'm sure someone will say it sounds like the US as well. But that power structure for real, like definitely looking at the oppression and how it works, right? And understanding it so you can stop it, right? And the same thing with like these warnings about, this is where we're heading. If we don't stop this is where we could potentially be. You know what I'm saying? And I think those are some things that stuck out to me. I love our conversation around the family structure. I really do, because I agree. It does remind me of what we hear about, like, a family's a village, right? Everyone supports the raising of a child and supporting the wife, the husband, and all these things. Like, I think Trevor Noah was talking about a tribe. I don't know where the tribe was located, but if someone wanted to build a house for their family, like the whole village would help them build that house. You know what I'm saying? And that's just something that we've gone away from because of like capitalism and all these things, right? But just, I mean, there's so many things that we can go off of in the book, but definitely the power structure, this idea of oppression, I think is very important to look at. And also this idea of like future, like our futures, like where do we see ourselves in the future? Like what place do we hold in the future? I think are some big things that I would want to.
I'm gonna say two things for me as we get ready to end our discussion. Is first one I would say is the importance of education, and it's clear that in the book, just like right now, we on this planet as a whole, and I'm gonna use America as litmus test. Those who don't know, you might have paid attention to some of the conversations unfortunately happening around, Elon Musk and the H-1B visas and stuff like that. because America does have a brain drain issue in this country. This country has exported so much of the work and the working factories that do the work that we don't have the jobs, and no one is educated around certain types of jobs because those jobs are not here in the States. There's a lot of IT jobs that are, even to this day, that are still contracted with either with people inside the United States or people outside the United States, because since the end of the 80s and into the Reagan era and beyond, this country, both Democrats and Republicans, have done a horrible, horrible job, and in some cases purposely, of defunding education system within the United States.
Yeah.
And so it's the very reason why when our audience, when you hear people, these negative individuals like Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy and some of these other ones in the Republican Party talk about how these individuals in America are idiots and they don't know the work. Despite their terminology, they are in fact true. That we have a huge problem in the United States. Right now, the average American in the United States is reading between the ages of 16 and 25, is reading at or below the 6th grade level. So you're talking about functional illiterate people who didn't finish high school, people who didn't finish grade school, are now, we're now trying to depend on these individuals to run a country and to work on in areas that they don't have the knowledge and don't have the depth of understanding to be able to do those things. And so that leads into what we have now, these wars and these skirmishes and these misunderstandings between countries because we're uneducated. And one big thing I talk to my students about in my writing is you have to be able to critically think. That is, you don't just simply take information, you take the information and apply it and make inference about what's happening and what might happen. And that's part of the thought process that's missing. The innovation is missing in this country. America doesn't really export anything new and innovative except new weapons. And that is a problem. And it's showing itself because statistically, and you all can do this research on your own, they did a test. They looked at the numbers after the election and saw that in all of the red states that voted and that voted majority for Trump, all of those states have educational outcomes put them the lowest of the low in the country and the world. The United States is now about 30th in the world with respect to level of education. So within this, you have the blue states were the highest, and that's just what it was. And so in these red states who are all gung-ho for Donald Trump and some of these ideologies that the Republican Party had, they're not going to educate you. They're not concerned about, they're only concerned about money. And I see that in this book, when I look at the other series, in the Patternist series, Mind of My Mind, the actual Patternist, Story of the Patternist, all those things, they have, when you read those books that tie into this series, you see there's a culmination of bad economics along with lack of education of the world. And that's exactly where we are right now. Right. And then you marry that with the fact that aliens are watching. We are primed to be exactly what this book is. The other thing for me is understanding ourselves, because most of this book in the series centers around, you see, this is what can happen to you when you don't work out your issues around otherism, around understanding each other and accepting each other as a part of the compendium or the, what's the word I'm looking at for the spectrum of what humanity shows up as. Juan Khalid is showing they don't have a problem that Juan Khalid have a spectrum. And we're okay with that because we've been around for 2 million years. And we understand now because after that 2 million years, we no longer have the diversity. So we had to get more diversity. So we understand and accept that we are very different people. We need to understand, again, how we show up. She was talking about how they wanted to make sure they understand how the DNA behaviors they produce, understanding how they're going to show up in this new Kali human hybrid species. And so for me, those two things, understanding ourselves, when you can be educated, you understand ourselves, you can miss and will miss a lot of these very, very, very bad outcomes that we are experiencing now and that we have experienced in the past. Because I think that's one of the things they bring up in the book is that one is like, just some of the arrogance, like, you tried. We've been watching we saw how you tried, and your doomsday clock kept on creeping up towards midnight. You can't do it on your own. We got you. Let me give you some of this. Let me give you some of this on Khalif, man. On Khalif's destiny. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, totally.
So, and that's what it is. On Khalif's destiny. That's what it is. So those of you all if you haven't read this book, if you don't know anything about Octavia Butler, first of all, you're cheating yourself out of some really golden, wonderful literary nuggets by not knowing who she is, what she writes about. And two, it would behoove you to read this series in particular of the comparisons and the parallels, intersections. For someone not to be an anthropologist, psychologist, or psychiatrist, she understands humanity quite well.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and just you could just tell that she was very observant, of how we interact with one another. And her imagination is wild. Her imagination was wild,
At on point, not only just wild and like this, like really, it's like she's just wild,
outrageous,
with, like, realistic stuff.
Yeah, exactly. You know what I mean? And I don't know that she was a big history buff or what, like if she was taking things that she knew has happened in history, but it's just really amazing, like that, even how relevant a story like Dawn is still today. You know what I mean? It's very, very relevant.
Exactly.
Very relevant.
Exactly. So I've enjoyed this conversation we've had.
Me
I hope
too.
that our audience has enjoyed it, and I hope that and I hope that the excitement you guys hear in our voices, and the joy that you invite in our voices, despite the intersection with some of the dark things that we're experiencing now, that you have a joy that even we have this joy for what we hope will be a better situation for humanity in the future, and particularly a better situation for our people if we can take the lessons and apply.
Exactly. Well said, Orlando.
Thank you. So we wish you all the best, and we hopefully will have in another month or so, we'll have another podcast looking at always at literature that we believe is important to our current situation and us having a better future on this African conference call. Calling you all to say, hey, you need to hear this, you need to understand this, and whether you apply it or not, it's on you. But this is the purpose of the African. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you for joining us, and thank you for sharing that time with us, because we know people have a lot of things that they can do. Show us.
Thank you so much, everybody. Yeah, thank you so much for listening. And please, like, a lot of the big reason why we wanted to create this podcast was for the conversation. So if you send us a message, send us an email, so that we can have conversations with you as well, to discuss the book or any other topics that you think would be really great for us to cover on this podcast.
And you can send it to afrophone@gmail.com. That's afrophone, like all one word, afro, AFRO, phone, Afrophone Radio, Afrophone Radio. Take care, everyone. Be safe, and we look forward to hearing you.
Thank you, everybody. Bye.